You are watching Pause. We pause for a second or two. How do we keep life coherent when so much is changing? This is episode 230, Situational Pausing. Today's episode will serve as a good overview of what pausing can be. The emotional skill of today's episode is core skill pause. It is the Polaroid you see in the mid-bottom here. Core skill pause is at the foundation of everything we do. Pausing can be applied in every and any situation. And when we talk about pausing, it is useful to talk about pausing in different kinds of emotional situations. And 5 very useful emotional situations are these 5 that you can see surrounding our core skill pause. Represented by these 5 cardboard colored cards, each with their symbol and a name. And also that each situation has its own color, so it is easy to recognize. Pausing, in one sense, is one thing in every and any situation. But pausing also differs depending on what kind of situation we find ourselves in. And today we will talk about how pausing differs depending on the situation. Starting out with our sleep situation. Sleep is about how we go from wakened state to deep sleep and then back to wakened state. And the deeper logic beneath our sleep situation is that we all want and need predictability. So when we pause for our sleep situation, going to sleep and waking up, the pause has as its focus our sense of predictability. That what we expect also is what we get. So say for example we have trouble sleeping, then we pause for a second or two and see what is predictable or unpredictable for my sleep situation. And then we are on our way. Moving on to our second emotional situation. In the top left-hand corner, our acute situation, signified by an orange-yellow exclamation mark. Our acute situation is for all those times when we find ourselves in a sudden and potentially dangerous situation. It's for all those times when we are shocked, startled, ambushed, or just surprised by something. And the deeper logic beneath acute situations is claims to authority. It has to do with who is standing where and in what way, and who is holding their hand on what and in what way. And every time we have a difference of opinion about authority, that is the deeper logic behind why acute situations happen in the first place. So to pause in an acute situation, we have to sharpen our mind. It no longer has to do with predictability, as in our sleep situation, but in acute situations, we're dealing with authority, claims to authority. So we have to sharpen our mind, pause for a second or two, and get a feel to who is really supposed to be standing here. What are we doing here? And then pausing in an acute situation often means to pause for but a second, often, and consider what kind of micro goal should we set next? What should we do in this immediate future of maybe just a couple of seconds, 2, 5, 10 seconds? So the time frame for an acute situation is very short, and thus pausing and the pause we do is also very short. Moving on to our third situation. In the middle, up middle, our long-term situation. It is signified by a green infinity symbol. Our long-term situation is for when we think about our future. But it is also about when we worry about our future or are anxious about where are we going to end up. And pausing, core skill pause, in a long-term situation, when we think about our future, then we are dealing with thoughts. We are dealing with us analyzing and sort of finding our place in this web of people. Where are we supposed to go? What is my role in life? So pausing in our long-term situation, we pause for a second or two and see how our thoughts are going. Do we feel we are leaning towards pessimistic thoughts or towards ambitious thoughts? Are we leaning towards individual plans or plans together with others? So this pause, a long-term pause, it is more about looking to the future. Again, very different from pausing in the other situations. And then we move on to our fourth situation in the top right corner. Our confused situation, signified by or denoted by two white grayish question marks. Our confused situation is about when basically the only thing we know is that there is something we do not know. It is when we cannot see clearly and we feel loss of control. We may have a hard time distinguishing if something is inside or outside, if something is me or you, or that we just don't know what we're looking at. It's just abstract what we're looking at. And pausing when we are confused is a lot about sort of getting used to being in the dark. Getting used to not knowing. And not be too quick to try to find a solution. But to wait until shapes sort of start appearing and we have something to navigate by. So to pause in a confused situation is a lot about staying cool, staying level-headed, not panicking and just, now I don't really know what to make of this. To just dwell in that uncomfortable feeling. Uncomfortable but necessary. Because everything interesting comes from confusion. It always starts with confusion. We need confusion. And lastly, we talk about our fifth emotional situation in the bottom right corner, our worn out situation, denoted by 3 red-black dots. Our worn out situation is for when we feel at our wits' end. We feel tired. We feel that we are spread too thin. We cannot take one more step. We're just worn out. And our worn out situation is about that the deeper logic beneath what makes us worn out is when we are in an asymmetrical relationship. When we are in an asymmetrical relationship, one part is taking all the risk in the dynamics. And with such a dynamics, there is no symmetrical connection there. There is no symmetry. And that wears us out. That is very difficult to live with day in and day out. So to pause in a worn out situation has to do with finding ourselves in a sadness, finding ourselves in a disappointment, finding ourselves in something regrettable. Pausing in a worn out situation is very difficult. And pausing in a worn out situation is a lot about sort of facing ourselves in a humble light, a humbling light, that life is difficult and we strive for symmetry, but sometimes for reasons, sometimes known and sometimes unknown, we find ourselves in a very asymmetrical relationship. And at sometimes there are things we can do about it to create something symmetrical, but sometimes there is not. Sometimes the asymmetrical relationship is inevitable, or we can see that this asymmetry is necessary in order for something else to be symmetrical. Do you see? So to pause in our worn out situation is to see that life is give and take. Sometimes we sort of give to take at some other time. So our worn out situation is humbling, and it's often about all those times when we struggle with something and bang our heads against the wall, trying to make something work that might lean on a difficult premise or impossible premise. So now we have made some kind of overview of the different things pausing can be, depending on what kind of emotional situation we find ourselves in. But as always, pausing starts with us taking a second or two to recognize what is going on. So we pause for a second or two and get a sense of what kind of situation are we in. Is this about sleep? Is it acute? Is it about our long-term future? Is it that we are confused and do not know? Or is it that we are worn out about our situation? And there are more situations. We could find more. But these 5 are very useful. And these 5 are very effective to organize our life after. Me personally, I have not found that I need any other than these 5. They sort of cover it all. That's it for today. Thank you.